560 The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So we're talking about Jim Jordan, the House Judiciary Committee being in Chicago today to conduct a hearing on crime. House Oversight Chairman Jim Comer announced the witnesses for the first impeachment inquiry hearing that will occur on Thursday. They are...
Do we need a drum roll?
Law professor Jonathan Turley.
Oh, good.
Eileen O'Connor is a former assistant attorney general, U.S. Department of Justice's Tax Division. And Dubinsky's his name. He's the founder of he's a forensic accountant with 40 years of financial investigative and dispute consulting experience. So we're going to have testimony on the business and legal dealings of Biden Incorporated, starting with the big guy. And one of the topics, House Oversight Committee Chairman Jim Comer, Republican from Kentucky, vowed to subpoena records related to is Joe Biden's corporation. Joe Biden's corporation.
Okay.
Celtic Capri Corp., which received nearly $10 million in 2017 without specifying revenue line items. So what was the $10 million for? From where did it come? And by the way, that would encompass the timeline that the FBI informant who alleged Burisma Holdings bribed Biden and Hunter $5 million each, that he's repeating something that he heard, that would fit that timeline. I'm not saying that the two are connected, but it's worthy of inquiry, which is what the House impeachment inquiry is all about. For more on this and related topics, pleased to be joined again by Michael Goodwin, New York Post columnist, Fox News contributor. Michael, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you both.
So, I mean, what's your assessment of the progress and speed at which Jim Comer's House Oversight Committee has moved? And this, of course, would incorporate Speaker McCarthy as well. I know they've received some criticism from the Matt Gaetzes of the world that they haven't gone fast enough, they haven't played hardball enough. But I actually think that it's proceeded at a pretty brisk pace and pretty methodically, and we'll see what these who are testifying before the committee, these individuals have to say on Thursday. But I think it's been pretty professionally done to this point.
I do too. I believe that there's been a lot of information that has quickly entered the bloodstream of those of us who follow this, and we don't really appreciate the source of it. For example, the fact that there was this welter of shell companies and shell accounts where money was moving around, something like 20 accounts that Hunter Biden set up, where money came from various foreign paymasters and then moved from one account to another without seemingly any connection to the source. But it seems to have been designed simply to put distance between the source of the money, the Chinese or the Russians, but primarily the Chinese in this case, and the final recipients, who in one case turned out to be 9 different Bidens. So that sort of thing we now know, which we had no idea of prior to this investigation. Now, Senators Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley in 2020 did a very interesting report that has not gotten enough credit for sort of laying out some of this groundwork in terms of how much money was actually coming to the Bidens. And they specifically looked at China. And I believe that Tony Bobolinsky actually was in some ways surprised by some of the information they came up with. Most importantly, that there was a subsequent payment of almost $5 million that came long after he departed, but was for work done while he was there and even prior to that. So there's a lot of funny money moving around, different timelines, different accounts, where it goes, where it's from, where it goes, who gets it. All of that, I think, is we know a lot, but we don't know everything yet. And so I think the committee has taught us all a lot, but there's clearly still a lot we don't know. And I think so the work that remains is formidable in the sense of how much of a scandal is really here. And then, of course, what the media has laid out, and I think in some cases fairly, is the standard that did Joe Biden directly profit? And I think that's the kind of slam dunk question. I don't think it's a nothing burger if you can't show that. But of course, if you can show that, then it's game over.
But with the impeachment inquiry, won't they have access to his bank account records? I mean, I hope that they're not that stupid that Hunter is transferring $1 million into his dad's bank account. But I mean, we should learn something, don't you think?
Well, we certainly should. And this S corporation that he formed. Don't forget, a lot of this happens when he's vice president, and there's the 4 years between vice president and president, and it's in those years that all of this money shows up in these S corporations, which the source of that money is hidden, and these are the corporations that he used to evade, or shall we say, avoid Medicare taxes of some $500,000, I believe.
The he you're talking about is Hunter now, right?
No, this is Joe.
Oh, you're talking about Joe.
Yes. He and Jill set up these S corporations that effectively pay them. They work for the S corporation. That's the way it's created. So their book royalties go in there.
Speaking fees.
But there is a total of something like $17 million goes in over 2 years. Now, where did all of that money come from? Some of it you can say is the book royalties, but the book royalties didn't come to $17 million. Right. So there's a lot of money that suddenly appears in their accounts, but we don't know the source of it. We know that they take from it certain monies, which they are supposedly paid by the S corporations, but we don't know the source of the S corporations' many millions. Okay. That's the sort of thing I think Amy was referring to.
Yeah, that's right. And on the the book royalties, actually, Ted Cruz did a good breakdown of that, since he has a little bit of understanding of how that industry works too. He's written a couple books. And, based on selling 300,000 books, which I guess is what the Biden book sold, he sort of breaks down what's a possible amount of money that could have been made in terms of royalties. And, right, it's nowhere near, and even with handsome speaking fees, it doesn't come anywhere near the totals that we're talking about in terms of the money that moved into that account. And so this is something that hopefully the House Oversight Committee can get to the bottom of and say, okay, well, what is the source of all the revenue, separate and distinct from who got paid out what from the escrow?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just something else we shouldn't forget, although I don't think it's dispositive in this case, is that there is a commingling of money between Hunter and Joe all along.
Right.
I mean, the laptop is full of things, but these are more or less incidental amounts of money. Clearly, Hunter is paying for expenses for Joe. There's talk of a credit card. There's talk of a debit card. There's of an open line of credit. So there's all kinds of money there. Whether that is the mother lode, I don't think so. Look, this is the source of Hunter's money. Any money Hunter spends is money he got from this influence peddling scheme. So it's not as though it doesn't matter. You don't show a large amount of money going into Joe's pocket, which is kind of the standard, I think, for this case now. To impeach a president, to convict a president, you are going to need a real motherlode of money going into his pocket, his accounts, coming from Hunter. I don't think there's any other way that the mainstream media is going to approve, let's put it that way, of the impeachment unless it comes to that conclusion.
Another category of circumstantial evidence that needs to be explored more deeply, though, is the behavior of these, well, the Department of Justice, not just Merrick Garland, but also U.S. attorneys. Now you have the IRS Director of Field Operations testifying to House Ways and Means that a prosecutor in Southern California declined to join with David Weiss and prosecute Hunter Biden for tax fraud. And so, all these people running interference for Hunter Biden, including the Attorney General, that potentially speaks to, what they're trying to prevent people from getting to. And it again, as I said, it's another area of circumstantial evidence and at minimum, perhaps professional misconduct.
Right. Look, I think the lack of curiosity by Merrick Garland as to Joe Biden's potential role in all of this, which I think leads to David Weiss, as someone inside described to me as sort of going native, that he was going to do this case until Joe Biden became president. And I think the New York Times, which has been despicable in much of this, had one significant amount of original reporting, which was that David Weiss was not going to charge Hunter Biden with any crime until the IRS whistleblowers came forth. And the Times had hold of communications between Hunter's lawyers and David Weiss and others in DOJ, and it showed a sudden change of heart the minute the IRS whistleblowers came forward. So how was David Weiss going to justify no charges? And finally, that kind of decision, no charges for the president's son, would have to be signed off on by the Merrick Garland or somebody, Lisa Monaco, his deputy, who's an ardent far-left Democrat. One of them would have had to sign off on that. That question has never come up in congressional hearings. I don't know why, but someone should ask Merrick Garland, did you or Lisa Monaco sign off on the plea agreement, which, of course, was thrown out of court? Because that does not get to court without the Attorney General approving it because it's such a high-profile case.
The ABC Washington Post poll that the Washington Post is now trying to downplay as an outlier. Maybe it is, but nonetheless, it had Trump up 10 points on Biden head-to-head. Does all of this,
heads are exploding.
The inquiry plus the polling, I mean, it really puts a crimp in the aspirations of Republican candidates, too. But does all of this put any additional pressure on Biden with respect to his continuing to pursue the nomination, or is that a fait accompli? Is it more likely than not that Biden will be the nominee?
I think it's more likely than not that he will not be the nominee. And I think this sort of poll undercuts one of his rationales, which is that I'm the only one who can defeat Donald Trump. I beat him once, I can beat him again. That has been a baseline reason, an argument for why Joe Biden should run again among Democrats. When you have these kinds of polls coming out, and you're right about the way the Washington Post and even ABC will begin to trash their own polls because they don't get the results they want. Nonetheless, whether it's an outlier or not, and it is just by the numbers, it's different from the other polls, but they're all showing a trend. They're all showing the same trend, which is that Biden is extremely unpopular. His policies are extremely unpopular. A majority of Democrats don't want him to run again. So at some point, I don't see how he withstands the weight of this. And if it looks like his candidacy is going to result in Donald Trump becoming president, I mean, the Democrats are going to, I think, physically carry him out of the White House.
Michael Goodwin, New York Post columnist, Fox News contributor. Michael, thank you as always.
Always a pleasure. Thank you both.
Oh, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hi, folks. Dennis Prager here. You've probably been hearing my colleagues and me talking about investing with YRefi for a while now. You may have some questions, so let's review. It's true. You can earn up to a 10.25% fixed rate of return that is not correlated to the stock market or the Fed. You can turn your income on or off, compound it, whatever you choose, and there are absolutely no fees. There is no attack on principal if you ever need your money back, and you'll get your monthly statement with no surprises. Just go to investYRefi.com.